I'm 37 and I've been married to my wife, Daphne, 36, for 9 years. We go way back, having known each other since high school, and in that time, she's become one of the few people who knows nearly everything about me. Our relationship grew over the years as we went from friends to something deeper, and eventually we got married. I'll admit my past was rough, to put it mildly. My mother struggled with addiction, and I lost my father in a tragic way because of it. I was the one who found him, and it's a memory that's haunted me ever since. I went into foster care and dealt with a lot of anger, especially towards women after everything with my mother. But over time, with a supportive foster family and years of therapy, I worked through my issues as best I could. Meeting Daphne in high school was one of the biggest changes for me. I was still carrying a lot of pain, but she was patient, kind, and understanding. We didn't start dating until we'd been friends for years, but looking back, people around us probably knew before we did that we'd end up together. After college, I asked her to be my girlfriend, and within a year we were engaged. 9 years later, we're still married, or we were, until now. Daphne wasn't there for the hardest parts of my childhood, but she's been my anchor through all the ups and downs since. She knows I struggle with depression and other mental health issues, and she's always been understanding, even comforting me when I'd spiral into a bad episode. I've apologized countless times for being a burden, and she's always reassured me that she was fully committed to being there for me. I thought we had a solid bond and mutual understanding. But now I'm not so sure. About 4 months ago, I fell into a bad depressive episode. Usually, Daphne is supportive and stays close by, but this time was different. She was there for the first couple of days, but then she started leaving in the evenings, saying she had things to do. At the time, I wasn't in the right headspace to question it, so I let it go. But by the third day, her coming back late, sometimes past 1 a.m., started to get to me. When my episode ended, I looked back on those nights, and something didn't sit right. She'd never done that before. I brushed it off, thinking maybe I was reading too much into things. But then, about 2 months later, I had another tough day, not quite a full depressive episode, but enough to feel heavy. And just like before, Daphne left halfway through the day. This time, I felt it in my gut that something was off. When she came back late that night, I asked her where she'd been, careful not to sound accusing. But she responded defensively, snapping at me, asking why I was coming at her like that. Her reaction shocked me. Daphne had never spoken to me that way before. I took a deep breath and calmly asked her again, but she just stared at me with this look of frustration. Eventually, she said she'd been out with her girlfriends and had completely forgotten to tell me. That answer didn't sit right with me at all. I tried to bring up the other nights she'd been gone, but she claimed she didn't remember what I was talking about. She seemed irritated, and it only made me feel more uneasy. I let it go for the moment, not wanting to start a fight, but her unusual behavior stayed on my mind. A few weeks went by, and things seemed to settle. Then, one day, she disappeared again. I wasn't even having a rough day, I was just working late at home. She didn't say where she was going, and I didn't ask when she got back. Part of me hoped she'd offer an explanation on her own, but she didn't mention it at all. I tried to tell myself that maybe I was being paranoid, but something inside me couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. Finally, I decided I had to know. So one night when she was in the shower, I grabbed her phone and went to her Google Maps location history. What I found surprised me. She'd been going to the same bar every time she disappeared, and afterward she'd end up at a different residential address each time. I took photos of the addresses on my phone, intending to check them out later. I considered hiring a private investigator to find out who lived at those addresses, but instead I decided I'd try to figure it out myself. The next weekend, I decided to put my plan into action. I pretended to be in a bad mood, hoping she'd slip into her usual pattern. Sure enough, around 6 p.m., Daphne dressed up and left the house without a word. A few minutes later, I followed, wearing sunglasses, a baseball cap, and a jacket to avoid being recognized. I knew exactly where she was going, that same bar. I kept my distance and walked in, scanning the crowd until I spotted her. She was alone at the bar, nursing a drink, but she didn't stay alone for long. A man joined her not long after, and from their body language, it looked like they didn't know each other well, but they got comfortable fast. They started laughing, and she kept touching his arm. My heart was racing, but I forced myself to sit there, watching, until I saw enough. After about an hour, they left the bar together. I followed from a distance, watching as they walked 3 blocks to an apartment building. I waited across the street, my mind swirling. I wanted proof, something undeniable. When they finally came out of the building, they lingered under the lights by the entrance. I took several pictures, and just when I thought I'd seen enough, they kissed. That was the last straw. I stormed across the street, shouting, asking Daphne how she could do this to me. Her date looked shocked, but she told him to leave, and he didn't hesitate. Once we were alone, we just stood there in silence, me staring at her in disbelief. I asked her, why? Her answer was blunt and cut straight through me. I'm tired of dealing with your depression and moods. It's exhausting. I needed happiness. Hearing those words left me feeling like my heart had been ripped out. I'd always been open with her about my struggles and even asked her many times if she was sure she could handle them. She'd promised me that she could, and I believed her. Standing there, all I could feel was a deep, raw betrayal. I turned and walked away, wandering aimlessly through the streets for over an hour. I felt numb, hurt, and completely lost. When I finally got back home, she was there, waiting. She tried to apologize, but I just went to our room and locked the door. I couldn't look at her. I barely slept that night, replaying her words in my head. The next morning, she was gone. I didn't care where she went, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let this betrayal go unanswered. After that night, everything was different. The betrayal hit hard, and all I could think about was finding a way to confront her with everything she'd done. I decided to gather my thoughts and put together a plan. As much as I hated the situation, I wanted to approach this calmly and clearly, without giving her any chance to dodge responsibility. A few days later, I asked her to come over for a talk. She agreed, not knowing I'd already spoken to a divorce attorney and prepared everything to move on from her for good. When she arrived, I kept my emotions in check. I asked her point blank how many people she had cheated on me with. She hesitated, then told me it was just one person. I could tell she was lying, so I pressed further, bluffing that I'd hired a private investigator. I mentioned specific addresses, watching her face change. After a tense silence, she admitted there had been 3 different men. Hearing that number felt like the final nail in the coffin. I handed her the divorce papers I'd already prepared, making it clear that I could never see her the same way again. She started begging, crying, pleading with me to reconsider, but I just sat there, unmoved. She must have realized it was useless because she left soon after, clutching the papers and barely holding herself together. After she left, I spent the rest of the day numb, trying to process it all. When we got to the official divorce proceedings, things turned ugly fast. I'd gathered enough evidence of her infidelity to help my case, but she dragged my mental health into the spotlight. Her lawyer argued that dealing with my depression had been a major struggle for her. I get it. It's not easy to live with someone who has mental health challenges. But her excuses and attempts to justify her cheating cut deep, even if they didn't hold much weight in the end. Divorce isn't pretty. I knew that going in, but hearing my struggles weaponized against me was another level of pain. Thankfully, the evidence of her affairs was strong, and the court ultimately ruled in my favor. I didn't have to pay alimony, and while I left her the apartment with all the painful memories, I kept the car and moved forward. Afterward, I decided to let everyone in our social circles know the truth about what happened. I messaged friends, family, and even acquaintances, detailing how Daphne had cheated because of my mental health struggles. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I wanted everyone to know exactly why we were splitting up. Not long after, she called me, furious, ranting for a full 10 minutes about how I'd ruined her reputation. I just let her vent and hung up. It was her mess to live with now. After that, things were quiet, at least from my end. She didn't reach out again, though one of her coworkers messaged me, saying she was dealing with a lot of gossip at work and asking if I'd consider taking back what I'd said to people. I left the message on read. I wasn't interested in making her life easier after everything she'd put me through. The reality is that, even with all the support from friends and family, the entire experience left a mark. I'm wary now, maybe too wary of relationships. I'm not sure I'll ever open myself up to anyone in that way again. Dating just doesn't feel like an option anymore, and I've decided I'm fine with that. Maybe I'll use dating apps for casual company if I need it, but I don't think I want to risk any serious attachment again. My peace of mind is more important. In the end, Daphne's betrayal changed me more than I'd like to admit. I've come to terms with the fact that some people just aren't who they say they are, and that's a reality I have to accept. The life I'd built with her is behind me now, and I'm focused on moving forward without looking back. My days are simpler, quieter, and I'm learning to appreciate the solitude and the clarity it brings. The peace I've found now isn't the result of vengeance or hurting her back, it's from letting go. Looking back, I'm glad I faced the situation head-on, no matter how painful it was. I'll never regret exposing the truth and showing people who Daphne really was beneath the surface. I don't wish her ill, but I've made it clear to everyone in our lives that actions have consequences. I hope she understands that now. I'm not sure where my life will go from here, but I know I'll never let someone treat me like that again. To everyone who has supported me through this, thank you. Your advice and encouragement made a difference during one of the hardest times of my life. For those reading this who might be going through something similar, remember, you don't have to stay silent, and you deserve someone who's with you through all the highs and lows. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories. Until next time.